Okay, yeah. So it's a really positive announcement. It's a huge step forward for New Zealand and for our economy, how we manage our waste and how we think about plastic in our economy. It is only the first step. It's one of several first steps that have already been taken. Not to forget the huge effort that the business community has already put into removing single-use plastic bags from their businesses. If some of you out there, when you go to certain checkouts in certain supermarkets or hardware stores, you might find that plastic bags aren't available. So we've seen the wider New Zealand business community take leadership, and now we're seeing the government of New Zealand be really brave and back that up and support the business community in that way. So what we're seeing is some great governance at work, I think, as a team working together. It is only the start. Single-use plastic bags are described as the lightning rod that everybody seems to attach themselves to. The plastic bag itself causes a number of problems in a number of different ways. There's a lot of them, and they do find their way into waterways. And with the waterway, they find their way to the ocean and then into marine life, and then start to pollute the wider ecosystem and ourselves, and other, not just marine animals, but animals on land as well. So my immediate reaction, hugely positive. Well done, Jacinda. Yeah. Yeah, it has taken us a while, I suppose. We've been the wider community and waste experts across New Zealand have been talking about what do we do about plastics for a very long time. Recycling has filled the gap for a while, carried us through, and we're seeing some issues there. But particularly with that recycling trade slow down and maybe cease for plastics, at the moment, I think it's added some pressure to really make a decision now about what do we do about plastic in our economy, and this ban is a part of it. Again, it's only single-use plastic bags, but it's a starting point from which we can grow upon. Whilst New Zealand wasn't the first mover, we're certainly not the last. There's plenty of other economies out there that are going to have to start to take some of these decisions seriously as well. They're in similar situations to ourselves. And I think our New Zealand's statement here adds weight and support to those other economies that are thinking about making such a statement. Yeah. Yeah, so in a similar way that we're all working together as a global economy or as a global humanity to come to terms with pollution and plastic as a pollutant and what that's doing to our global ecology. And in a similar way that New Zealand and those importing nations or waste consuming nations or waste producing nations supporting each other to make bans and take strong policy positions, regulatory positions, legislative positions on waste. The inverse is that those nations that were processing or are processing a lot of these pollutants are supporting each other to make similar statements. So we've seen China say, we're not interested in accepting this anymore. And I think that's really brave, and it is a productive step forward to making those consuming nations accountable for what they're consuming and having to deal with that waste, rather than China choosing to deal with that. I mean, it was a financially sustainable business for them, but it also came with a lot of pollutants for their place and their people. So the Thailand example with the silo trap, I think Thailand's taking support from its neighbours and saying, look, we don't really want this either. So what we're seeing is across the globe, nations and businesses, particularly international businesses that do cross the globe, working together and bouncing these statements between each other as we shuffle towards one hopes a plastic-free economy. Yeah. So we're seeing alongside this single-use plastic ban and the conversation around plastics, which is really important. We're seeing a new language emerge, and we're seeing conversations around zero waste, and this is really important. How do we reduce and hopefully get to something like zero waste in how we manage our communities in our countries and our global trade. Zero waste is really important because it's waste that's causing these issues beyond just plastic, but we realise there's all sorts of different types of waste. There's human waste, there's broader industrial waste, there's a whole spectrum of types of waste out there. So it's well beyond the plastic question and well beyond the idea of recycling. Recycling will only take us so far for certain products. So something like zero waste is a removing of the idea of waste, and what we're seeing alongside a drive for that sort of outcome is a drive towards what's described as a circular economy. And this is something that's really quite exciting, and at a design house like WSP Opus, this is what we take really seriously. We come up with ideas and turn them into reality, and this is what the circular economy is trying to do. So circular is exactly that. There's no end. It's a circle or a sphere. So and something like waste, or the concept of waste, is exactly not that. It's a linear line. It comes in and it goes out, and then there's this waste pile. And this whole concept that's causing us these problems. So as we strive towards something like a circular economy, we strive to turn waste into something that is actually not waste. It's actually something that's very useful. So that starts at the front end, and how we're beginning with the end in mind. So when we're designing whatever it might be, whatever product or service, we're recognising that there's no end to this. All the inputs become outputs to then become an input again. A circular economy is not anything particularly new. As we talk about single-use plastic bags, there's a lot of reminiscence around paper bags at the checkout. Everything was paper. Paper was reusable. It became a bread bag or a school lunch bag, and then of course it was compostable in the garden to become your potatoes. That's a good example of a circular economy, and I think it's really important to remember that this isn't particularly new, and some of these ideas are really coming back in a renaissance, another renaissance. So it's quite exciting. Other examples that we're seeing are conversations around plastic and glass bottles. The trade-off there, particularly milk bottles, although not only milk bottles. There is everything's interwoven, and we're finding that, as we know, we moved to plastic. It was cheap, but it was also very light. And when you think about moving a lot of liquid around the country, the weight difference between glass and plastic is significant, and then adds to the cost of freight. But not only the cost, but the carbon emissions from freighting. It's not without its issues, but the resurgence of glass bottles, I think, is something to keep an eye on. We might find them showing up on our front doorstep. Who knows? So how do we take this the single-use plastic ban on a soft plastic, like a plastic bag? How do we make that? How do we apply that more broadly across all plastics? I think that's the first thing that springs to mind. We need to celebrate this. I think we really do. It is the first step. But then how do we keep stepping forward? Plastic truly is fantastic. It's all these things. It's been really cheap. You can turn it into anything. It can do almost anything. And it's great at preserving food. So I think that's going to be a major challenge in the retail space for soft plastics, is how do we preserve our food and keep it safe, and maintain ideas like shelf lives and expiry dates without using plastics. So there's a lot of innovation in the space, which you're probably aware of. Playing with types of algae and seaweeds and all sorts of fungi to create these new plastics. I just heard recently using a certain, I think it was a wasp or a bee, that creates a certain cellophane in its wax comb, and how to tease that out. This all sounds very difficult. It's a lot more difficult than our petroleum-based plastics. The one-for-one substitution is probably not going to behave that way. But there are other options out there. But again, I think it's a wider structural and behavioural change in a similar way to how we're harking back to paper bags and glass milk bottles. It might be that we go to the grocer every day for our fresh vegetables rather than expecting them to last a week and buying them once a week.